everyone. Welcome back to What I Love the Podcast. And today we've been taken over by Skynet as we discuss the Terminator franchise. As always, I'm your host, Kate, and here with Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
And Matt.
Hello.
And Adrian is taking us on this long history of Hasta La Vista babying.
Yeah, it's a weird time. It's a weird time. Anyone who watches the Terminator movies knows that it's really just about 1 and 2, and then kind of 3, and then it just kind of goes downhill from there. But we might be back for Dark Fate. Maybe it's going to revitalize the franchise. Who knows? But first intro question, just to kind of get where people are at in terms of this franchise. Just real simple. Are you a fan of the franchise? Do you like it? Did you watch it as a kid? Where are you at? We'll start with Matt.
So I have seen pretty much all of these movies, and I'm not a fan of this franchise. I think obviously 1 and 2 are not bad or whatever. I know people like them; they do whatever. I think it's the most overrated franchise in history at this point. I wish it would have just been left. I don't know why they keep making movies. They've been obviously very terrible. They've not done well in 40 years at this point. We had 1, we had 2, great. I don't care anymore. Leave it back in 1991. I don't care.
Early 2000s sequels of all the stuff that came out in the 80s is basically my answer to that.
And now we're in 2010 sequels of all the stuff that came out in the 90s.
Exactly. What about you, Kate?
So I thought I hated the Terminator for the longest time. I thought I was with Matt on that point. I was like, I don't like the franchise. I think these movies suck. T2 isn't a great movie. All that stuff. But I realized that I hated it because I came into it at I think you said it was number 4, Christian Bale's
Salvation.
Terminator. And I was like, this is not, I don't like this. What is happening? And then when I went back to watch the other ones, I couldn't sit through them because I just kept thinking about that one. And then, I saw Genesis, and that was awful. Real awful. So I thought I hated it, but I gave T2 another shot, and it's not bad. I like it. I know it's really formative, and I know a lot of horror people who, love it. So that's about where I am.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and you can kind of see that in some of James Cameron's influences for basically the whole franchise. For me, my dad had all of these, 80s and early 90s action movies and 70s action movies. So this was just one that I had watched. I watched Terminator 2 way more than I watched Terminator 1. I thought Terminator 1 was fine, but as a kid, I remember really liking the silver, gooey, scary monster man. I thought that stuff was pretty cool. And as doing the research through this, when we get to kind of something about why it's basically pretty revolutionary, and we wouldn't have a lot of our really cool CGI, or it would have taken us longer to get our really cool CGI without T2 as a movie. So again, it really just comes down to Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 Judgment Day being kind of the big parts of this franchise. But they might be in a resurgence. Who knows? We're going to find out. So for our production history, if you're unfamiliar with the franchise and you're not getting any of the Hasta La Vista babies or anything like that, the Terminator is an American media franchise created by James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd. The franchise encompasses a series of science fiction, action films, comics, novels, and other media concerning the battle between Skynet, a synthetic intelligent machine network, and John Connor's resistance, which basically has a bunch of humans. Basically, long story short, U.S. develops the global digital defense network that becomes self-aware, thinks humans are bad, wants to kill them all.
Thinks humans are bad?
I mean, it thinks humans are bad, yes.
They just confirm that humans are bad. As all intelligent AI has confirmed in all of these movies, because you only have to be on the internet for 10 minutes to realize humans are bad.
Yeah,
Nice
check out our
Voltron
Discord.
reference.
There's lots of You're not. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying what Skynet wanted to do.
There was no thinking.
But as always, if they just killed all the humans, then we would have no movie, right? So humanity fights back with the resistance, not to be confused with Star Wars' resistance, but they do fight back and basically Skynet develops time travel, basically, and both Skynet and the Resistance seek to use the technology in order to win this war, either by altering the past or accelerating past events or preventing the apocalyptic timeline, a whole bunch of stuff. When we go through like the synopsis of the movies, it gets real weird real quick with this franchise.
Real bad.
Yeah. So the series essentially goes back and trying to rewrite timelines, which essentially provides like endless opportunities for stories. Basically, a new movie comes out, and we're back in time. And then one of the movies decides, hey, now we're going to the future. So it just basically just creates this big loop of this is why you're able to get more movies because there's time travel, and then they start.
Can I ask a question? Is
stuff.
there any movie that has done time travel that's any good? Besides, maybe I guess Back to the Future.
So you meant like movie franchise that has done it, like for multiple movies, or like good time travel movies?
Both.
There are good time travel movies.
Outside of Back to the Future, what do you got?
Terminator 2.
Okay, we now have one movie and a franchise. What we got?
You know, if Box Office Mojo was still
right,
Office Mojo.
I'm sure there's a timeline category there.
Hold on, there's going to be some typing here because I'm going to...
I also am a big fan. I mean, I haven't watched the movie in years, but I enjoyed the movie Time Machine, where they go back in time or to the future or whatever, and then like there's like the divergence of humans and whatever. I kind of like that movie. I thought that movie was good.
Looper is actually good.
Looper's not bad.
Looper is good.
It's
the
alright.
weird thing with Looper is just that weird Bruce Willis makeup.
It's
but
alright.
The actual writing and like the writing and the storytelling of like the like continuity is really good. There's Deja Vu.
That wasn't
that
wasn't that good.
Meet the Robinsons. Really good.
It's an animated movie.
The Butterfly Effect. Also really the first one. The other ones don't exist.
Oh, the other 8?
Timeline. Oh, Clock Stoppers? Come on now. These are time travel classics. Timeline's really good.
I don't even know
It
what
has
Timeline
Knights,
is.
and it has Gerard Butler.
Yeah, I remember that one. I don't remember Clock Stoppers.
12 Monkeys. Also really good. A classic, if you will. The Voyage Home.
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. That one's pretty good.
Bill and Ted.
I do not like Bill and Ted.
Of course you don't. I'm not surprised by that.
The second one's really good. I like the second one.
Planet of the Apes. The original one. Not the weird one where they really look like humans, and not the Andy Serkis one because that's not time travel.
Was that really considered time travel, or was it just got lost in space?
Escape from Planet of the Apes is time travel.
Which one?
Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
You blew it up. Anyways, all this to say,
But
Terminator 2
classic. The Lake
does
House.
time travel.
Oh
my god. No.
Yes.
Starting to side with Matt here. So moving on from there, essentially time travel is like the big proponent of here, and it's really what keeps this franchise moving. But in the early 80s, James Cameron, who at this point had only directed Piranha 2, The Spawning. Have you guys seen that one? The classic Piranha 2, The Spawning?
That sounds like a Matt movie, though.
That's like a sci-fi special kind of thing. Basically, Cameron had a fever dream about a metallic torso holding kitchen knives, dragging itself from an explosion.
The hell type of drugs were you on in the 80s?
What?
It's the 80s. So basically, with that dream and the inspiration from John Carpenter's Halloween, he was compelled to make his own slasher-style film, which kind of speaks to Kate's point about horror fans liking Terminator. His agent didn't like the idea, so he basically fired his agent and then went to go work on the idea anyway. And
bold
then
move right there. I like it.
Hey, I like it. He's like, hey, I've done Piranha 2. I don't need you. And then bounces. So with the help of scientific writers, Randall...
To be fair, I will say this. That is probably the biggest flex we had ever talked about here on the podcast, because Stephen King saying, oh, well, I'm just going to go make my own movie, was when Stephen King already had the Stephen King money. James Cameron was like, I did Piranha, guys.
I'm good. Let's go. Yeah, I didn't even look it up, because I'm pretty sure I've seen it like on Sci-Fi at like 4 a.m. one day.
I'm
But
sure Matt has seen it.
I'm pretty sure it was part of that little thing where they were trying to recreate Jaws, and they started using like a bunch of random animals. Like we had orca, then we had piranha.
oh yeah, Orca. I remember Orca.
I do remember Orca, actually.
Yeah. How many seals does he throw in that movie? So basically, from there, he basically drops his agent and then goes to work on the movie. So with the help of scientific writer Randall Frakes,
Breaks.
and
Breaks.
Bill Wishart, Cameron had an initial script with 2 Terminators being sent to the past. One that looks like the T-800 that we see in the first movie. Point here. I'm just going to say T-800, T-1000. I'm not going into the, it was Mach bomb, blah, 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 blah. It's too much. It's too much. It's a T-800 is what we're going with. Sorry, at me later. Don't care.
You should feel
The T800
ashamed if you know the differences.
I was like going through this and I kept seeing it differently. And I was like, it's a T-800. That's what like colloquially everyone knows it as. So it's what we're going with.
You know what?
So
all you gotta do in writing is you just gotta pick one and stay with it all the way through, and it can't be wrong.
yeah, that's what we're going with. So we have the T-800 that we see in the first movie, and then one that looks like the T-1000 in the second movie. But the technology wasn't there yet, so he was only limited to the T-800 style. So he just went with the one Terminator in the first movie. Gail Hurd, who at the time worked as a producer for New World Pictures, showed interest in the project, and Cameron basically sold the rights to Terminator to her for $1, with a promise that Cameron would, with a promise that she would produce it if Cameron directed it. Hurd also made suggestions for the script, which got her a credit as a screenwriter, which is like a point of contention with like her, I guess, with her and Cameron, because like she claims to be part of the creation of Terminator, but like James Cameron just kind of like, did you really kind of thing?
I would like
which
to
is
point out the
interesting.
fact that they were married.
Oh, I did not realize
They
they
were
married.
from 85 to 89 after she married De Palma. She's actually a producer on so many freaking movies. Like, she's one of the reasons that Tremors exists.
Oh man,
Does she
they got their
marry
Terminator
people?
money and they got married.
Yeah.
I like it.
She like when you do like a James, we'll end up doing James Cameron eventually. She's actually on a lot of his movies, if not all of them. So that point of contention happens all the time.
Part of them dreams.
Interesting.
Them late night dreams.
Imagine how his dreams turned after that. Eventually, the movie would get picked up by Orion Pictures, which is now owned by MGM, on a $6.5 million budget. From here, the small idea that really not a lot of people gave a chance would grow into a 6-movie franchise that is currently number 36 all time on the movie franchises list, with the most recent movie still being still going on, and also has like one of the best sequels ever that we'll talk about a little bit later on. Basically, yeah. So this dude who had a fever dream turned this into a crazy franchise, and he wasn't even a part of like the later half of it until more recently. But still, with the franchising, all the stuff that comes out of it, still the number 36 all-time grossing movie franchise, which is kind of cool. So, for the movies, I'm just going. If you're wondering, oh, which one was the one with Christian Bale? Which one is the one that had Khaleesi in it? Which is the one that had other stuff? I'm gonna go through it real quick. So, with all the time travel and most recent movies not being well received, the franchise has been around for 35 years, and the movies have gotten kind of crazy. So, the Terminator in 1984, Skynet sends back a Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And if you are one of our patrons and you're like, why did you not spell out Schwarzenegger? Because you try to spell Schwarzenegger 50 times in a show notes. It's not fun. So I'm just going to put
I thought he
Arnold
was the
S
governor.
or AS. We're going to talk about him being the governor later. So they send him back to the past. Humans send back a human as well, Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn. Biehn.
I don't even know who that is. Sure.
The Terminator is trying to kill Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton, who will give birth to the future resistance leader, John Carner.
That's a different movie.
God.
That's a worse movie.
That is a time travel movie.
And that movie is
Yeah, it is a
awful.
time
we're
travel
on
movie.
track.
And that movie is awful.
John Connor.
Point for Matt on that one.
Kyle Reese is trying to protect Sarah Connor. Kyle dies during the final. I guess spoilers, but the movie's been out for like 30 years, so sorry, not sorry. Kyle dies during the final fight, but Sarah Connor crushes the Terminator. Kyle and Sarah basically bang earlier in the movie and conceive John Connor.
I would like to point out that if you look at pictures of Linda Hamilton from this movie, she was jacked.
Yes.
She was
She
very
actually
jacked.
Yeah, it was going to be one of my fun facts later, but she like got the role and then immediately started getting jacked just for this role.
She was like Demi Moore in G.I. Jane jacked. It was awesome.
Yeah, she was shredded. So Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and this is where we start getting like weird names for the movies. Terminator 2 Judgment Day in 1991. Basically, Terminator 1 kills it at the box office. Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger's careers are solidified, but the technology wasn't quite there yet for Cameron to make his Liquid Terminator, so they both went off to go do different things. In the late 80s, early 90s, technology advances, and T2 gets the go-ahead with a $102 million budget, which at the time makes it the most expensive movie ever made in the 90s. For the plot, Skynet basically, again, and this is a common theme with this series, Skynet tries to prevent John Connor from leading the resistance. This time, they send back a more advanced T-1000. Again, part of the franchise, to kill John Connor as a kid. Future John sends back a reprogrammed doppelganger of the Terminator from Terminator 1. Sarah has basically it's like 11 years in the future, and she's had her own plans to stop Skynet. So basically she's trying to like kill the guy who creates Skynet while other stuff is going on. And they basically, John, Sarah, and the reprogrammed T-800 basically have to defeat the T-1000 and try and stop Skynet from being created. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. Skynet still gets created anyway. So all the cool stuff that happens in this movie doesn't matter. It just prevents things from happening sooner. So then we have, in 2003, where things start to go slightly off the rails and not as good. I like this movie. It's fine.
I saw this
used to
movie
watch it
in
on
theaters.
FX. I always watch this movie on FX all the time. Mainly just because I like the part where Arnold Schwarzenegger's like carrying the coffin with like the machine gun thing.
That's one.
I always love that scene.
This
that
one
part's cool.
was on FX all the time, and I only liked it whenever What's-Her-Face was on the screen because her Terminator was real cool.
Yeah, she was cool. Also very scary.
This movie
So
also
Terminator
sucked.
3, yeah, it's not that great. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is directed by Jonathan Moskow because basically Cameron doesn't do anything with the franchise until later on. So the first film, this is basically the first one where he has no involvement, basically mainly because he's doing stuff with other movies at this time, but also there's like disputes with the direction that Fox wants to take the movies, which is a common theme for why this stuff gets so, muddy later on. In this one, Sarah,
for this episode, I looked up the coffin image. It's so good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And that's right. It's like really the only good part of the movie, to be honest.
Movie's terrible. But
Or
not
when he's
the
walking
worst.
down the hall. I kind of like that. Come with me if you want to live. I kind of like that part where he's walking down the hallway. It's all slow mo and stuff. I kind of like that part too. So in the third one, Sarah Connor is dead and John is an adult, and Skynet isn't averted. It's just postponed after the events of T2. Skynet sends another Terminator, this time a TX, and this is the female Terminator that can make guns from her arms and stuff to stop the resistance. This time, the Terminator is targeting future lieutenants in addition to John, and basically in the future, John Connor is dead, and his wife Kate, also being hunted by the TX, sends back another T-800 to stop Skynet again. So basically, we get Arnold Schwarzenegger back again as a Terminator, but this time his wife sends it. And so basically, John, Kate, and the new T-8, plus T-800.
John, Kate plus the T-8.
Yeah, I like that. That
I
works.
make jokes.
The trio basically killed the T10, but not, or the TX T10, I don't know how to pronounce it, but not before Skynet becomes self-aware and starts Judgment Day. John and Kate begin to lead radio comms and accept their fate as the leaders, as they're like stuck in a bunker as basically all the bombs are falling.
Yeah, this movie ends with them in the bunker going, oh, you're here to be safe until they all think so you can survive and then lead. So
yeah,
awful.
basically that's how that movie ends.
So awful.
Then you have the fourth movie, Terminator Salvation.
This is even worse than the last one.
In 2009, this one's really bad. I saw this one in theaters and I regret it. when the rights to Terminator were bought in 1999, the two movies were mapped out so that T4 was basically inevitable. They had already planned out Terminator 3 and Terminator 4 when they got the rights in 1999. Rights for this stuff changes hands a whole bunch, but basically by the late 90s, they already planned to do this. So regardless of how bad Terminator 3 was, we were eventually going to get a Terminator 4.
Yep.
Basically, in this one, Skynet is developing Terminator technology sooner than expected, and now John Connor, now played by Christian Bale for some reason, leads an attack on Skynet. They find out that they are experimenting on humans, and they try to lead an operation to save them with the help of a Terminator hybrid named Marcus, played by Sam Worthington. And this is just like where everything kind of gets weird.
Yep.
Something, plot, something. Kyle Reese is there, played by Anton Yelchin, R.I.P., something. Basically, the movie ends with John and Marcus fighting a CGI Arnold Schwarzenegger as a T-800, and Marcus sacrifices himself, and the movies keep going, and John basically lives.
Because Marcus was a Terminator, but he wasn't a Terminator.
But he wasn't a Terminator, and he was a Terminator who could give his heart or something.
I hated this movie.
This movie is
much.
awful.
And so bad that it made me hate all other ones.
Yeah, it's not that good. You know what's worse? Terminator Genesis.
So I can't even remember if I've actually seen this movie because I saw the last two and I learned.
Yeah, I saw it on Hulu.
Fool me once,
I was just lost the whole time.
I saw it once also on Hulu because it had Emilia Clarke in it. That was the only reason I watched it.
Yeah, it's the only reason I watched
it.
I
feel like
I finished it.
I was like, I think I've seen bits and pieces of this movie, but it was one of those like...
We were together at the time, so I probably had it on, and you watched it and was like, nope.
Yeah. So Terminator Genesis in 2015, if you remember this one, is basically the biggest thing for this is that it's basically a reboot that doesn't matter. Because it was supposed to start a new trilogy by taking the original premise and taking in another timeline. But, spoiler alert, that doesn't work. So, basically, in 2029, which is very scary because it's like 10 years away, almost 9 years away now. And I don't think we're anywhere close to this. But, movies, I guess.
Well, technically we're not because technically the U.S. military released a report saying that they want to build something like Skynet. But apparently because the people are biased against this technology because of these movies.
Thanks, Terminator.
It's almost like Isaac Asimov way back when said this is why you don't mess with robots.
Yeah.
But yes, that did release I believe 3 days ago of this report of the US military trying to build something like this, but they're having trouble doing it because the public saw these movies and they don't want
That makes sense. If you want to get some even crazier, Skynet is not even really called Skynet in this one. It's called Genesis or something because alternate timelines and more time travel in their thing.
That's even worse. That makes that movie so much
No, this movie...
Yeah, it's really weird. So in 2029, John Connor sends back Kyle Reese, basically the main character from the first movie that also appears in the fourth movie, played by Anton Yelchin. Those two look nothing alike. Why did they cast it that way? I have no idea.
Alternate timeline?
Yeah, I guess. So Kyle Reese is now played by Jai Courtney, who is trying to protect Sarah Connor. Sound familiar? Now played by Emilia Clarke, a.k.a. Khaleesi from Game of Thrones. In this timeline, Skynet never started Judgment Day in 97, and Sarah is being raised by a T-800. So basically, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back again, who was sent by someone else to be her guardian, but they don't really tell you who it is, if I remember right. So she's just being raised by this robot. So basically, plot. They have to go to the future, which is in this time 2017, to stop Skynet, because that's when Skynet's going to come back online or whatever the case is. They run into John Connor, who is a T-3000, who is infected by a T-5000, who is basically the physical embodiment of Skynet, and this all happened while Kyle was gone.
Infected?
Because this is super virus T-5000 Skynet.
Did he have sex with T-5000?
I think I don't know. He injected a virus or something.
So I looked at some of these. So I did look up the stuff, and I have seen quite a bit of this movie, but it's very bad because I remember the Emilia Clarke stuff.
Yeah. So basically, Terminator Connor was sent back to 2017 to ensure Skynet's survival. They end up beating the Terminator John Connor, and basically Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator gets like a new upgrade, like where he gets like the metallic stuff on him, so he's like a better and bigger Terminator, and they basically live happily ever after. But not really, because a mid-credit scene that I didn't see shows that Skynet survived at the end of the movie.
This movie should have never been made.
Yeah, it's all over the place and crazy. Um, yeah. So Terminator Dark Fate is the newest movie, and it is a reboot again, but this time they're rebooting it after Terminator 2. So basically, Terminator 1, Terminator 2 still happen, and
They
everything after
attempted to
doesn't
wipe
matter.
the slate, like
Yeah,
Halloween did, or Halloween 2 did.
basically, yeah. So, very basic plot from like IMDb: an augmented human and Sarah Connor must stop an advanced liquid Terminator who is hunting down a young girl whose fate is critical to the human race's survival, or something like that. Tim Miller is directed it. Cameron returned as a writer. Arnold Schwarzenegger is back again. Linda Hamilton reprises her role as Sarah Connor, and that's what we have for that movie.
Apparently, this movie bombed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which one of the things that like kind of like makes me sad, because like all the critics I follow were like, this was actually a really good movie, but then they were like, but at the same time, I thought I was gonna hate this movie going into it, but I saw this for free, so I went to go see it and realized it was good. A regular public goer is like, Matt, I've tried this twice before. We're not going down this road again, and didn't spend the money.
Yeah. So if you're one of our patrons, you can see a couple tables on here. I put in the box office performance. Basically, the first two movies do really well, considering. I mean, the Terminator on a $6 million budget does 38 million in North America, 78 million worldwide.
It's also
T2
1984, so
yeah, it's pretty good, especially on such a low-ish budget for kind of movies in that time. 102 million budget and 500 million gross worldwide for Terminator 2, and then everything else kind of just does marginally better. Terminator 3 does okay, I think 170 million budget, 433 worldwide. Then kind of just goes down from there. Terminator Dark Fate, at the time that I pulled this thing like last week, $185 million budget on a two, and at that time had made 250 million. So really not anywhere close to being super profitable. However, if you look at the responses and kind of the reviews, basically Terminator 1, Terminator 2, 90 plus does really well. Everything else kind of goes down from there. But Terminator 2 Dark Fate, again, at the time that I pulled this report, Rotten Tomatoes was a 71%, Metacritic 54%, Cinema Score B+, so not terrible considering where this franchise has been over the last.
So the fun thing about
three
this,
the
movies.
audience score is also an 82% on Dark Fate, which I think like having both of those at that high a number is kind of sad.
So the best thing about this is, back in 2003, Matt went to watch Terminator 3 in the movies, and we all saw this movie. We're like, this movie is bad, and it had a 69%. But somehow they managed to make the next two movies, in which they are like a 33 and a 27%.
Yeah. You can see why they rebooted this franchise basically twice. So in kind of in other media, I mean, the movies are kind of the big thing, but there is some kind of cool stuff in other media for Terminator. So there was a television series, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles on Fox. Basically had 2 seasons in 2008. Both of the seasons were in 2008. It's kind of weird, but they both had them then. I never saw it. I remember seeing it pop up.
I watched
like,
the
on,
first few episodes, but I also didn't care for Terminator, and so I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, I never watched it, but it does have how do you say her name, Kate? I was just gonna say Cersei. Cersei from Game of Thrones. You know who she
Lena
is.
Headey?
Lena Headey. And then Sarah Connor as Sarah Connor, and then Summer Gao, who's River Tam in Firefly, was a Terminator in it.
Who was grossly underused in Wu Assassins. Still mad.
Grossly underused in
everything?
almost everything that she's in, basically.
I do want to circle back to Dark Fate real quick. I looked up all the characters and everything, and one of the Terminator things that is helping them, Grace, was jacked in this role. Like,
yeah.
I found a picture of her throwing a bar pipe, and it's just like, she got very big biceps.
Yeah, I mean, even Linda Hamilton at 69 looks...
She looks good. I mean, Arnold still
good.
looks really good for how old he is, and this is where I bring up the fact that that man is actually the Terminator because somebody drop kicked him and he didn't even move.
That was
Yeah, I
funny
remember
though.
that. Yeah, that was
That was
hilarious.
funny. He's
He
like,
has a tank.
He's just like, oh, who kicked me?
he didn't even know he got kicked. He thought the crowd was just going crazy, and somebody told him that they drop kicked him, and he's like, "Oh, I did not know this."
Also, like, why would you do that? Like, there's a
I
lot of
mean,
people in the world you can drop kick, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's not one of them. I would try to drop kick.
I mean, the man is imposing. Like, he has never not been imposing. Even as the Governator, he was imposing.
Yeah, definitely. So there was also a couple web series. There was one, Terminator Salvation, in 2009, which supplemented the 2009 movie. Also, Terminator Genesis, which is like a YouTube Chronicles in 2015. Haven't seen either of these things. Looked up some clips. Not super impressed.
Also, R.I.P. Machinima.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like one of the best parts of BlizzCon back in the day. So there's also a novel. Basically, I mean, there's a few novels, but the biggest one that supplemented Terminator 2 ran from 2001 to 2004 with a bunch of issues. There's video games. We've talked about this before, but basically anything that comes out in the 80s or early 90s has a bunch of video games, mainly based on Terminator 2. But I think the best one that always comes to mind is the pinball game, and of course the arcade game that gave you a machine gun.
That stuff
Those are
is
basically
still
the two.
in arcades. And it's
Yes,
so
those
fun.
basically the two you see everywhere. Kind of like our last episode or 2 episodes ago when we talked about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those games are still everywhere, even to this day, in Chuck E. Cheese's and Peter Piper's, because not a lot of arcades anymore.
I think the only arcade game that I'm really sad about not seeing anymore is House of the Dead. House of the Dead 2,
You also
to be specific.
I thought that would be in everywhere.
Well, they don't have 2.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
2 was my favorite.
Yeah. I haven't played the Terminator 2 arcade game in forever, but I'm sure the graphics are
That
terrible.
wait, so the Terminator 2, the one with the machine gun, that was the one where you actually went into like the booth, right? Like the little.
That was Time Crisis.
Yeah, there was the booth
No,
one.
Time
I'm talking about the
Crisis
one
is
where
the
you
one with
just
the
stood
pedal.
there with like the machine gun.
Oh, is that not
and
what you
like-
meant? I thought that's what you meant. It was like in a booth.
No.
there.
Time Crisis doesn't have a booth. It's just the foot pedal for ducking and covering. No, there was a Terminator game where it was kind of like the Jurassic Park game where you actually like a little seat thing and you went into it.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about like the early one where you are basically just standing there with a machine gun and you are shooting stuff.
I remember that one, but I come back to it.
All right. So you also have some comics. There's basically a bunch dating back to 1988 under different companies. It was with Now Comics, Dark Horse Comics, Marvel Comics, Malibu Comics, Backnet Comics, Dynamite Comics, and is currently with I don't think there's a current run, but his last run was with IDB Publishing.
IDW.
IDW. What did I say?
IDB.
IDW Publishing. I should know that because I write stuff for them.
I'm like, that's like no.
So I did not expect there to be a musical, but there was.
That makes
The
me so happy.
Terminator, the musical, actually played in Austin, where we are based at, in May 2019. So we missed it. There was this thing going on, and we missed it. A review from the Oslo Chronicle called it the sort of loving parody of nuclear apocalypse and time traveling AI that audiences should experience at least once. And I have the review to the musical in the show notes as well. Kind of mad that I missed this.
I am too. I'm looking to see if there's videos of it. There's not.
I couldn't find any, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sad.
Yeah, so it's basically what we have for the kind of the production history. Kind of long, but mainly just because it takes a lot of time to kind of summarize these movies because it's kind of crazy. But as we kind of move into some about why those, again, really focus on the first 2 movies. So the first one I think is pretty important when we talk about the careers of primarily James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not that Linda Hamilton didn't have stuff after this, but it's really James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger that have kind of the bigger roles after the first Terminator. So again, prior to the Terminator, James Cameron had only done the Piranha movie, and after its success, he would basically go on to direct Academy-nominated movies like Aliens, The Abyss, True Lies, Titanic, Avatar, and I guess all the 17 million avatars that are going to come eventually. But basically, he'd end up with 41 Academy nominations, and 21 wins, basically through those movies. And other notable achievements I thought were kind of cool. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He has an award from the Visual Effects Society Lifetime Achievement Award, basically from his work in Terminator 2 and Aliens and things like that. Is in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. And if you look at his filmography, he really doesn't have that many movies under his belt.
But they all hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they all smashed.
Well, I also think the other thing too that makes him really, or I guess that kind of defines him, is he knocked sequels out of the park. Like Aliens is not a bad sequel, and it's something that people still freaking love. And same thing with E2. Like, and that's really hard to do, especially in science fiction franchises, because science fiction is kind of like horror. Like, as sequels go on, the worse it gets.
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about that, and we talk about Terminator 2. That Terminator 2, we really don't have that many good sequels anymore, and James Cameron just happens to do basically two of the best ones, kind of basically back to back.
So, also, by the way, for the fun fact, until inflation took over and Marvel or Disney bought everything and whatnot, he actually had basically he had the number 1 and 2 highest grossing like movies pretty much for the longest time between Titanic and Avatar.
Yeah, that's crazy. And again, like his filmography is not that big, and I'm not sure if this is true.
Oh,
I don't know James Cameron.
He only has 23 credits.
Yeah, no,
he.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them haven't come out yet.
Yeah, no, he does. Yeah,
yeah, he kills it. And he still gets all of these accolades with his short film filmography. And from what I was reading, not the easiest guy to work with. From what I've read of things on set, like he just has a notably just like losing his temper and things like that during the filming of Terminator 1 and 2. So he's able to do all this stuff and still not be the nicest guy to work with. And me and Kate talked about this on Boondock Saints. When you're not really easy to work with, you don't make movies after that in our Boondock Saints.
Unless you're really good.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would like to point out he has 23 directing credits. When you take out the documentaries and you take out the TV episodes and the shorts, he has only directed 8 features.
Like I said, when you
Holy
have 41
crap,
nominations,
I didn't know that. He's so
yes.
prolific that I'm like, oh, you must have like a Takeshi Miike like thing.
Why do you think he's probably an asshole? Because he's like, you know what? When I make a movie, it's good.
You know what? I'm firing my publicist. I'm out of here.
Like I said, you can be hard to work with. You just have to be very, very good.
That's
it's really weird because I'm a big fan of like looking up rankings and things like that because I think rankings show kind of at least public opinion and as like kind of pop culture thing. I think those things are important. I couldn't really find him on any big list, but I think it's because they put people like Spielberg and all this stuff above him because they have more films. But when you talk about like pound for pound with 8 features and you have 41 nominations and 21 wins, that's pretty.
When are we doing the Spielberg thing of like how many movies did he actually make that we all don't like? Because I swear there's a lot of them.
No, let's not.
Because everybody always tells me Spielberg, and I'm like, when I think of Jurassic Park and maybe like whatever, then I'm like, there's a lot of movies that he made that I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah. I will say this. I think one of the reasons why we all think that Cameron is on so many other things is he produces so much stuff, or he like kind of writes a little bit, and he gets his name on stuff. They're using Guillermo del Toro just like they've used James Cameron, which is why like everybody was like, Alita is a James Cameron movie. It's like, no, Robert Rodriguez rewrote all of James Cameron's script. That was not a James Cameron movie, but they used his name. So
he'll get an episode eventually. So also from here we have Arnold Schwarzenegger. This one's kind of a little bit different because Arnold was also already like a huge star because of basically he's like the golden age of bodybuilding as the 7-time Mr. Olympia, but his acting career like hadn't taken off just yet. He had done Conan the Barbarian in 1982, which is a few years before Terminator, but Cameron didn't even want to cast him because he didn't think that he was big enough star to play the pivotal role of Kyle Reese. Cameron actually, when he had planned to meet with Schwarzenegger, wanted to avoid casting him, so he's already thinking of like a plan to be like, oh, I don't like this guy. But after meeting him, he basically is like, hey, no, I don't like you for Kyle Reese, but what about you playing the Terminator?
Yeah.
And that's basically how we get that. And there was even like a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger saying when he was doing the filming, or he was getting ready to go do the filming of Terminator, he basically said, oh yeah, I'm doing this, like while he was like doing press conferences for Conan, he was basically said like something to the effect of, yeah, I'm doing like this shitty movie with, about robots and stuff. He didn't even think that too much about it, but it would basically launch his career. So after dominating the 70s as a bodybuilder, he would go on to dominate basically as an action star in the 80s and kind of into the 90s. So he did Commando, Predator, The Running Man, Total Recall, and Kindergarten Cop. What kind of bridges his '90s into the kind of the more action comedy roles, where in the '90s he would do, or in the '90s he would do The Last Action Hero, Jingle All the Way, Batman and Robin, underrated.
Horrible.
So good. So I hate him as the Mr. Freeze that I love, but I love him as his Mr. Freeze. Like that makeup, like that metallic blue paint. I love you, Arnold. Also, Jingle All the Way
Also
is
awful.
one of Jingle All the Way is one of the best holiday movies for the same reason that Krampus is like it still manages to tell you a story about Christmas while showing you how terrible people will rip you apart for toys.
Basically, yeah. It's a good Christmas movie because of how bad Christmas is. That's basically like that.
All we keep learning is Kate has terrible taste.
No, it's good.
Really go look that.
Why are you booing
Kate
me?
has
I'm
campy
right.
taste.
No, you're not. You're not even close to right. So, fun fact about Batman and Robin: we went to go see Hellboy, and I told her, and I live by this philosophy of Rotten Tomatoes. Everything, you have like the 90s, it's probably Oscar bait percentage, and usually between like low 90 to like 70s and 60s, you probably have a pretty good movie. Even 50s and 40s, you can have hit or miss. 30s, depends on the person. Anything that's 15% or low is just bad and awful. And then she was like, but what about Batman and Robin? And I was like, I guarantee it, that movie is 15% or below. And then we pulled it up. And it was like a 12.
That's sad. I don't think it's a 12 bad, but
yes, it is.
If anything, it also gives us
It
one of my
ruined the
favorite
entire
Alamo
Batman franchise.
It gave me one of my favorite Alamo Drafthouse "Don't Talk in the Movie" things, where he freezes the dude. He's like, "Hey, we will talk during the movie." I like that part. I like that one. Also does Junior True Lies, which again, if that might sound familiar, because he also does True Lies with James Cameron. I watched that movie the first time for a long time on Thanksgiving because my dad and his damn action movies. Not a bad movie.
It's all right.
I kind of like
It's
True
not
Lies.
bad.
Running Man is really good.
Running Man also really good.
Not bad.
Yeah.
So
is Junior the one with Danny DeVito? Okay.
No, that's not. No, that's a different one.
You're thinking about the Penguin.
No.
That's also
No.
Batman.
No.
No.
Yes, it is. He's in here.
Yeah.
When Arnold
And he
gets
has, like, the
pregnant,
glasses and
didn't it?
stuff.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So basically, in the 2000s, he's basically doubles as a movie star and the Governator. So he does Collateral Damage, The Rundown, Expendables, all these Terminator reboots, but also like basically runs California at the same time, and is literally called the Governator. He's not called like, I don't know, the Predator or whatever the case is. Like they go off of, they don't call him Conan the Governator, or I don't know, whatever punny stuff you can think about for his other movies. Terminator is the one that they kind of make all the jokes about. And basically, he basically lays the groundwork for The Rock to become the first movie star president here pretty soon, I think. So from there, we kind of move away from Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger because Linda Hamilton is basically like one of the best action heroines in a movie. And we have talked about, action heroines in the past, but I think it's hard to get bigger and more badass than Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. The only one I can really think of that comes close is Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in Alien. And we talked about her in episode 14 in The Wayback Machine, time travel. If you want to go back and listen to us in The Wayback.
Those aren't available anymore.
Oh, those aren't available anymore.
Yeah.
Just kidding. We did do that.
That was one of the
but you can't
worst
do it.
listened to episodes ever.
But this means we can do a reboot of it, and we can
Yeah,
about it.
no one will know.
You know what? I may have been born in
amazing.
I may have been born in the
Alien and
80s,
Aliens
but
is
I do
good,
not
though.
like a lot of 80s movies. I do not
Alien
like a lot of
Aliens
80s
is pretty good.
movies.
Alien is great.
Yeah. So if you go just go Google, best action heroines, it's essentially Ripley and Sarah Connor are basically top 3 in all of them. So, and the best thing about this is usually when we look up these lists, sometimes they're out of date, but a lot of these lists are basically kind of more relevant, 2016 to 2019 or so. So Vulture had 11 most influential action heroines of all time. Ripley was number 1, Sarah Connor number 2. Parade had the 20 greatest action heroines in movie history. Ripley number 2, Sarah Connor as number 3.
It was number 1.
I believe who was off the top of my head? Furiosa was number 1 on that one. So it's basically Furiosa, Sarah Connor, and Ripley from Furiosa from Mad Max are basically like the 3 that you see the most.
These lists are pretty consistent too. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm looking through them right now. I agree with
Yeah.
a lot of these. I mean, there also aren't that many female action heroines. You could just put them all on a list and it would be fine. I feel
This
like
is
that's why
also
Gina
true.
Carano's
Yeah.
on there. Just saying.
So Film Inquiry has 10 greatest action. I can't. Kate clicked the thing. Now I see Kate Sanchez on the. Okay, there it is.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Film Inquiry has the 10 great action heroines of cinema. Ripley number 1, Sarah number 2, and then Screen Rant has not just like the character, but basically the 10 best female action stars ever. And Linda Hamilton is number 1 on that list. And I'm going to tempt Twitter Army and people who love Alien and that franchise, and maybe Kate, if you disagree, since Matt doesn't really have an opinion on either of these franchises. But I think Sarah Connor's probably more badass than Ripley, because I think that Ripley's more badass in Aliens, but James Cameron directed Aliens. So basically, you get the same kind of stuff there.
So the funny thing is, I just like Sigourney Weaver more than Linda Hamilton. So that would be the thing.
No.
That makes sense. But also, like, I mean, Linda Hamilton's still carrying the franchise at 69 and still looks great.
Sigourney Weaver is doing
Have you seen
documentaries of Planet Earth and other types of things.
So
No, I'm talking about like the characters, like Sarah Connor and Ripley.
Well, I
being
know.
badass.
That's why I said, like, I don't really care about the
No,
characters. I just like Sigourney Weaver more than I like Linda Hamilton.
Ripley is more badass. Like, I think they're both badass. I like them. They're great. Ripley just stays. She is good in both 1 and 2, and she's never underutilized in either one of them. And then in 1, additionally, the fact that she survives, takes over, and is able to do all of that with her entire crew essentially working against her because they won't listen. Like, yeah, no, I don't agree there, but I do.
Sarah
agree that
Connor smashed a Terminator in the 80s. They didn't even have cell phones yet.
Unkillable freaking alien with acid. And
He's
and
in a spaceship.
a robot. She actually
He's in a
does.
spaceship.
She kills a robot in the first one. She kills
the first one, yeah.
Dave.
Yeah, but who's scarier, Dave or Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Nobody likes Dave.
They both.
And then
they
he
both
throws
have
an even
robot
more
kills.
badass.
They both have.
She kills an
robot
even
kills
more
under their-
badass
under
one
their belt.
in Terminator 2 and makes it go blah, blah, and gets all crazy. And then she's 69 and still walking off of stuff. I don't know. I just think she's a little bit more badass. They're both badass, but
I think Ripley's way better. I like Ripley hell of a lot more. That being said, and I really wish James Cameron said that his female heroines were better than any female heroines. And I'm like, they're really great, but they still have some issues, James. Let's not.
I mean, you
let's not
say
do
that,
nothing.
but they're on number 1 and 2 of all these lists. So is he wrong?
I agree with that. What I'm saying is James Cameron needs to not talk because he puts his foot in his mouth.
oh, okay, that makes
That
sense.
is the problem. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that and I also think he takes credit for Ripley after moving Ripley past what Ridley Scott set her as. So I don't like that people throw Ripley under him because Ripley only exists in Aliens because of the foundation that was built in the first one. Give Ridley Scott his due. That being said, he put his foot in his mouth, and I don't like, but it's because he has an asshole quality, which, like Matt said, when you're good, you can't see anything past your own goodness. So I don't like that. Because of a lot of the reasons we have the Alita we have was because of what Robert Rodriguez did to his script treatment to make Alita better. That being said, I do think that when you look at what defines an action heroine, Ridley Scott and James Cameron kind of set that foundation, and they're one-dimensional-ish, but it's the first time we actually get them doing more things and having their own agency, and then anything after that, like, if you look at any science fiction that has a powerful woman in it, they usually base it off of Ripley, and same thing if you look at any Linda Hamilton.
Aren't all 80 stars just one-dimensional characters anyways?
Yes, they are.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the point of action stars most of the time.
That's why they're probably... Yes, but like I said, you're like, they're all one-dimensional. I'm like, yeah, everybody in that damn movie is one-dimensional.
Because I would argue Ripley has the most dimension out of any of them, including the ones that happen in
So she has 1.5 dimensions, or 1.2.
He has like 2.
Like,
I'll
even
bet
Arnold
look-
Schwarzenegger in those movies, not like he's like multi-dimensional.
No.
He's a literal robot.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like,
No, but that's the point. I'm saying that is literally where we started with action heroes, and now we've moved. That's it.
all I felt like you wanted to do was defend Robert Rodriguez and try to shit on James Cameron at that point by making the same exact point that James Cameron did.
I don't know if that's true.
That's not true. It's called knowing the women in action. And
What?
again, there's very few of them. There's like 5. So, like,
And they're all
it's
made by
also
James
not a very
Cameron,
large
apparently.
test. Huh?
And they're all made by James Cameron, apparently.
One of them is made by James Cameron. The other is made by Ridley Scott.
Until we get to this next but why, though, and we'll see what happens.
So basically, you have the actors being really great, regardless of your opinion on whether Ripley or Sarah Connor's better. They're both 2 of the best. And then you also go into Terminator 2 itself being not only one of like the best sequels that there is on, any list that you can find, but it's also a CGI game changer and really paves the way for a lot of the movies that we have today, or even directly following it. So in terms of being the best sequel nowadays, and we've talked about this multiple times, but we get lots of sequels and prequels that come out, and it's really kind of hard to find one that's better than the first. And something like that, something that like takes the first movie, does what it does, and then does it better. I think T2 does that. And then again, Aliens, I think we had this conversation before, but I think I like Aliens better than Alien personally. So you basically have James Cameron having arguably one of 2 of the best sequels that have like been made ever under his belt, in addition to having worked with, Ripley, not creating Ripley, but worked with Ripley's character, and then having Sarah Connor. So if you look at some other rankings, again, I have these all posted in our show notes for our patrons. Empire has T2 as number 3, Aliens number 1. Time Magazine, number 11 out of 35, with number 1 being Bride of Frankenstein. Ranker has it as number 2, with Empire Strikes Back being number 1. And again, kind of like you said before, Kate, these lists basically have all of kind of the same stuff on it, so their rankings really don't change all too much. I think the crazier thing is that most of the movies that you see on these lists are basically from the 70s and 80s. So with like the exception of course, The Dark Knight, which we've talked about in our Batman episode, probably debatable if it's even that good of a movie anymore. The Two Towers, Spider-Man 2, Toy Story 2, Shrek 2. Basically, the rest of them are basically 70s and 80s movies. So you have T2 being a great sequel coming out of a time where out of like the last 30 years, where we really don't have that many great sequels.
So the fun thing we're going to do is in like 15 years, we're going to do who is the best 4th movie of all franchises.
And then Matt's going to get to talk about Mission Impossible.
And what about the best 5th movie of all franchises?
Yeah. Or the best prequel movie. So the movie itself, I believe, if I remember right, is the only one that has any Academy nominations for obvious reasons. The movie itself won 4 out of the 6 things that it was nominated for. So it lost cinematography and film editing to JFK with Kevin Costner, but it won makeup, sound editing, and visual effects. And this is big because the visual effects that it does basically changes the game for CGI for the rest of time. And if you remember, they didn't make the second movie until much later because they didn't have the technology to make the movie. So once they did have it, they were doing things that hadn't really been tried before. So the team behind T2 was Industrial Light and Magic, who have a long list of like CGI accomplishments before T2. So in 1980, they have the first use of Go Motion to animate the Tauntaun creatures in The Empire Strikes Back. In 1985, they have the first completely computer-generated character, the Stained Glass Man in Young Sherlock Holmes. In 1988, they have the first morphing sequence in Willow. In 1989, they have the first computer-generated 3D character to show emotion, the cephalopod in The Abyss.
So can we
Also
just say
a James Cameron movie?
Can we say by thing, out of all James Cameron movies, I like The Abyss the best?
I'm not surprised by that literally at all. I don't think anybody's surprised by that.
This is on brand.
And in 1991, they have the first partially computer-generated main character, the T-1000, in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. This took a team of about 50 artists working on the movie for about a year to get it where it needed to be with 45 different shots. Before this, with things like The Abyss and Willow and things like that, they'd only done 3 or 4 shots with this kind of technology. So this was like a big step up between The Abyss and Willow. they essentially bring morphing into the mainstream. So if you remember, in like the 90s, you had lots of stuff with morphing, and it's basically because T2 does it so well.
Animorphs. Do you mean
Animorphs.
I have to think Terminators for Animorphs?
Yes.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
That makes me happy.
And the use of CGI past only using it on humans. So they tried it with like the cephalopod in the Abyss, but they do it a lot more. ILM also worked on Jurassic Park, so we may never had what Jurassic Park looks like today without them like basically trying stuff out in Terminator 2. Because in 1993, ILM does the first time we have digital technology used to create a complete and detailed living creature, basically the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, which also earned ILM its 13th Oscar.
Which we all discuss in the groundbreaking Jurassic Park in our other episode of I have no idea what number that is anymore.
You're also correct.
I think it's 93.
Also,
I'm going to take a guess.
That's Apollo. You are incorrect, sir. Also, we got rid of stuff on our thing to make room, and I don't know what episode it was, but it wasn't 93.
Oh, okay then. Take a guess.
So basically, and this is a good point for Terminator being good, and for Matt to see, we wouldn't have Jurassic Park without Terminator 2, or at least have a good of a Jurassic Park without Terminator 2.
So I don't hate Terminator 2, but everything after that,
I'm just saying.
Everything after that, you should be ashamed of.
Not wrong. Genesis is not good. So one of the coolest things I found when kind of looking up how they basically did a lot of the stuff, ILM basically was doing motion capture before it was even a thing. So in order to digitize Terminator 2 star Robert Patrick, so they can turn him into basically the chrome version, which is technically the T2000 when he's all chromed out, they painted him with 4-inch by 4-inch grids all over his body and then filled him simultaneously from front and side so they could basically rotoscope his movements. I put a link in the show notes of a YouTube video.
This is real early mocap.
Yeah, this is like super early motion capture. Basically, Robert Patrick actually got blisters on his feet from running on the rubber that they had because they had him do it a bunch of times. So basically, he bleeds so Andy Serkis could run and do all the cool stuff that Andy Serkis does. Because we wouldn't have Andy Serkis doing all the cool stuff without this guy having stickers pasted to him.
Yeah. It would
and
also
even on.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I was gonna say
go
I definitely want to point out too, Industrial Lights and Magic, the majority of any sort of movement and any sort of special effects comes from them.
Yes.
They are one of the most influential special effects companies.
Yep.
Both practical and CG.
Yeah, just to preface, the things I put in there aren't a extensive list. I think they're just the ones that were most relevant to what they do in Terminator 2. But I mean, they do things with Star Trek. They do things with Jurassic Park. They're still doing things today. So
yeah,
very, 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 very huge. And this is also, I also want to point out that they did get it for basically the CGI stuff, but they also still have a bunch of practical effects in the Terminator. In the Terminator and Terminator 2. So the Terminators that we see at the beginning of the movie in Terminator 2 are basically all fully working animatronic models. At the end of the movie, when they're basically melting the T1000, the artificial substance used that they use instead of melting steel, which is actually kind of dangerous and things like that. The artificial substance they use is actually, they need to keep it pretty cool to get the right density. So they had to actually keep the substance really, really cold. So the actors actually had to have fake sweat sprayed on them between takes to kind of get that effect that this thing was really, really hot. So just two little snippets. So even though they are pushing the grounds with CGI, they're still using a lot of the practical effects that make Terminator 1 still hold up pretty decently. So lots of cool stuff there. And then I got some fun facts. If you want to hear some fun facts.
Yes. Always.
That's really all I got after that. So I added fun facts all throughout. And there are some cool ones, but I thought one of the more interesting ones was who could have been. So Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, and even OJ were cast to maybe be Terminator.
I think people forget that OJ actually played in quite a bit of movies for a while.
I know.
Yeah. James Cameron did not take OJ because he didn't think that OJ could have been the killer Terminator. Didn't think that was a good look for him.
Well, the Terminator is up front. He doesn't use gloves.
He's also the one doing the chasing, not the one being chased.
Exactly. So Sting, the singer Sting, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, like I mentioned before, could have been Michael Reese. I think having Sting would have been hilarious.
That'd been great.
I also read, when I first read this, I thought this was like Sting the Wrestler, and I was like, oh my god, please give me that.
No,
I would love to see that.
this is Sting, the mumbler.
Yeah. So early concept art used singer Billy Idol's face for the T-1000, and Cameron briefly considered him for the part until Idol broke his leg in a motorcycle accident and couldn't complete training in time for the movie. So we could have had Billy Idol as the T-1000 instead of like the white angry guy as the cop, which would have been also hilarious, I think. And just because I like things blowing up, the minigun used in Terminator 2 was the same minigun that was used in Predator, also starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. So they used
that
the
is
same
actually his minigun.
I guess, yeah.
From
So I like that. I like Predator and I like this movie, so I thought I'd throw that one in there. But we're pushing an hour, but that's basically what we got. At the end of the day, this franchise may not be very as it once was, but it's still, those first two movies are still super important for launching careers as well as really pushing the grounds of CGI to give us some of the cool movies we have today and really putting ILM on the map for being, kind of like the premier CGI company, which for better or worse, whatever your feelings are on CGI, is still super important because we wouldn't have Jurassic Park and, some of the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, but I do think we get different between CGI and Jurassic Park and then what we have today as CGI.
Yeah, and I watched like this big documentary on it, and you can, and they even say like, oh, these days people don't even like it anymore. So what we did then was really groundbreaking because you can kind of tell, what is CGI and what isn't. And what ILM did so well was like, when I was little, I thought those dinosaurs were real. I thought those were real things. And ILM also like really, or when they work with who they're working with, still integrating those practical effects to not make the CGI just overblown. So they definitely hit that really good balance in not only Terminator 2, but the other things that they worked on as well. They might need their own episode. Like, that's how cool they are.
I mean, they have enough credits to deserve it.
Yeah. And that's really all I got. So we can do some final thoughts, and then we can get out of here. Matt?
Didn't go see Terminator Dark Fate. Thought about it. It looked decently better, but then again, I saw another of the other ones to know better, which is probably why everybody else thought the movie bombed. I still think this is another one of these franchises that we keep trying to revitalize. We were now getting Ghostbusters, Predator. They already tried again. Just leave the damn movies in the 80s. I personally don't care. I think they were, like I said, T2 and stuff in the 80s, early 90s movies. I'm not going to say they're bad movies, but at the end of the day, like, you've now just making 5 movies that are awful, and I don't. I know why people like the first two. If you like any of the other ones, I don't know what's wrong with you.
I mean, a lot of people liked the most recent one.
Yeah, and
that's fine, but I mean, we're talking about like in general of like all of these
I don't think you're wrong. Like, one of my but why those was almost that like this franchise is part of that wave of never-ending sequels even into now.
Yeah.
But there's just so many of them. I don't know if you can pinpoint when it started, but this is definitely one of the reasons why we get so many reboots and stuff like that, because of
like in 80s. Basically, it's a bunch of people that are our age that want to go back to the 80s to revitalize their childhood because shit sucks, and we're gonna do good with nostalgia bait. And here we are. Which you could probably cut all that out, but I'm tired of it. Ghostbusters looked like ass.
I haven't even seen the new trailer. Is it good?
It looks like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
It's literally just Stranger Things.
So the way it was summed up in our writer's chat was, it looks like somebody had an original script, couldn't pitch it, and then so they put Ghostbusters on it.
Which is basically what they've been doing with a lot of this shit, which is why it's don't care.
Which, as much as I love the new Jumanji and the other one, it's kind of like it could have easily been its own.
Yeah, I love the two, but I still don't like that it's called Jumanji.
Yeah, which, like,
and the more and more we get, it's more and more away from actually the original in the first place at this point.
My but why though is in kind of the same vein, but more so just in, like, I feel like with the more sequels we get, the more we're missing out on having, like, the next big moment in science fiction or the next big moment in genre. Like, I think action is actually getting new stuff with, like, John Wick, but not even that much. But it's like, when you have something that is even John Wick's about to be on its 4th sequel. But like, I would much rather take a new IP getting sequel to death than something that is on sequel number 9. Only because I think if we keep rehashing, and if we keep, even as good as James Cameron is, if we keep giving James Cameron work, we're missing out on all the new stories that can be told and like the next pop culture moments. Like, honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why I loved Stranger Things so much, because it was something that was new and unattached to things and did its own thing. And I think that, like, I think there's a fear of doing new things because of how much people have a bias against genre films, so like science fiction, action, and it's easier for people to go and do what they know because they're like, oh, there's a fan base built in, this isn't going to be hard. E- which is one of the things that it always hits me as weird, because even as much as horror has the sequel to death problem, horror still finances like small movies that get made on $100,000 and like you still get new IPs coming all the time in that genre. And I want it to also happen in science fiction and action, but I worry that because those movies have to carry such a higher budget because of production, we're gonna keep getting stuck in this cycle. And it just kind of makes me sad because like I love Cameron, I love Ridley Scott, I love the people, kind of love Spielberg, don't really love him that much. But I like, we have a foundation, but we need to start building new things on it. And so like just like a more positive spin on what Matt said. I think that there is a lot of talent there, and it is one of the reasons why I do love Netflix and these other people coming into the production game, because we are getting different things and we're getting stuff that we're not seeing anywhere else. Like See You Yesterday is an amazing time travel movie, which I just remember
Which
that
one?
they put out this year. Like we're getting Altered Carbon. It's a series, but like that's still, it's adapted from a book, but it's still a new type of series. And I think that there's a big hole to fill, but we shouldn't be scared about filling the hole that these franchises kind of like built.
Well said.
Sorry, Adrian. I'm tired of sequels and stuff, and I want new
I mean,
IPs, and that's
I
why.
I didn't go see the last like two, like the last one in theaters anyway. So like I'm there with you, man. Only if I like it. Like I don't. I'll take 17 more Fast and Furious movies, but I don't want to see Predator ever again in the movies ever. Like just stop doing it. Please stop. Stop it.
Yes.
Only if you get old Arnold Schwarzenegger back.
So,
Just kidding. I don't want that.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's okay. I think we can get out of here.
Okay.
I think we'll be back next week.
As always, you can find the podcast at But Why the PC on all of our social medias. And if you want to help support us a little bit more, head on over to patreon.com/ButWhyThePC. Leave us a review on iTunes, wherever you listen to us, those kinds of things. It really helps. And then you can find me on Twitter at OvenMithRandier. Adrian?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SuperRuiz93, SUPERRUIZ 93.
Matt?
That's about the way these movies went.